Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. This is the Mental Breakdown. I'm your host, Joey Velez. Today we're going to be talking about one of the simpler but often most overlooked tools that an athlete can use to improve their composure, and that's their breath. When we think about performing under pressure, we oftentimes think about, making sure my confidence is there, my motivation is there, practicing visualization, having more effective self-talk. And all of those things are important and do matter. But before you can use those skills effectively, you need to be able to regulate your physiology and how your body's feeling. And that's where breathing comes in. So whether you're stepping onto the tee box in front of your friends, you're standing at the free throw line, you're preparing for a big lift or a big presentation, or you're getting ready for those final minutes of a game, your breathing can either help you manage that pressure or it can become a part of the problem. When you experience pressure, the body's threat response system can become activated. Your heart rate increases, muscle tension increases, attention narrows, breathing typically becomes faster and more shallow. The response isn't necessarily bad. In fact, a certain level of that sort of activation can help performance. The problem occurs when that sort of activation gets too high for what the task requires. So think about an athlete who suddenly starts rushing. A golfer speeds up their pre-shot routine. A basketball player takes a rush shot. A baseball player starts overthinking every single pitch, every single throw. The athlete may know exactly what they're supposed to do, but their physiology makes it harder for them to execute that skill. Breathing provides you a way to interrupt that cycle. And the important thing is that you don't have to completely eliminate nervousness, because the goal isn't to become, emotionless. The goal is composure. Composure means being able to experience pressure, recognize it, regulate yourself, and still be able to execute the task that's in front of you. So, what should athletes actually do? So, one of my favorite techniques is actually having a controlled diaphragmatic breath because, or with an emphasis on having a longer extended exhale. So here's a simple version of this. Okay, so you're inhaling in through your nose for about 4 seconds, and then you're exhaling out through your mouth for about 6 seconds. Now you can adjust those numbers, based on what feels comfortable. The exact timing isn't magic necessarily. What ultimately matters is that the breathing is controlled, it's comfortable, and the exhale is slightly longer than the inhale. So we're going to try that right now. Okay, so I'm actually going to walk you through a couple of breaths. Okay, I'm going to walk you through, I'm going to say in 2, 3, 4, out 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So that'll get us to a 4 second in, 6 second exhale, and then we're just going to see what happens. Okay, so go ahead and exhale all the air out of your body, and in 2, 3, 4, out 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In 2, 3, 4, out 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Slow inhales and a longer controlled exhale. So I'm not going to ask you how that felt, right? But that's just kind of what the premise of what we're going off of is, and with that sort of breathing, the purpose isn't to take the biggest deep breath possible because that's actually a common mistake is you don't need to fill your lungs to the maximum capacity. Instead, think about having a slow, quiet, controlled breath. The goal is to create a rhythm that communicates to your body, to your mind that I am in control. Now, here's where breathing becomes particularly useful in performance. So you can use it before, during, or after mistakes. So before performance, breathing can help you transition from, general everyday life into your performance mindset. So maybe you're sitting in the locker room before a game, on the range before a round of golf, or at your desk before a big presentation. Instead of allowing your mind to run through every possible outcome, spend 30 to 60 seconds by just focusing on your breathing. Slow it down, feel your feet on the ground, relax your shoulders, and bring your attention to the task that you are about to perform. Now, during performance, you may only have a few seconds, and then that's where a single breath can become a part of like your reset routine, right? So, a golfer standing behind the ball takes one controlled breath, then steps into their shot. A basketball player, we see this all the time on TV, they'll take a big deep breath before they go into their actual free throw motion. Or, same thing with a pitcher, right? They might take one big breath before they actually deliver the ball. So in these scenarios, the breath is serving as an anchor. It gives the athlete something controllable to focus on instead of focusing on the scoreboard, the crowd, the opponent, or the consequences of the next action. But perhaps the most valuable application is after a mistake because, mistakes are inevitable. They're going to happen. You're going to shank a shot. You're going to miss an easy putt. You're going to miss your next free throw. The mistake itself isn't always what hurts performance. It's usually what happens after that mistake that hurts the performance. You start replaying the scenario, you become frustrated, your breathing changes, your attention gets stuck focused on the past, and now you're carrying that previous moment, that previous mistake into the next play. And this is where the concept of having like a breath reset can become very valuable. So what that looks like is mistake happens, you take a breath, you reset, and then you refocus on whatever the next thing is. So the breath becomes that physical sign that tells your body, hey, that play is over. Now it's time to get back on the task. And you don't need to spend 30 seconds, focusing on your breathing in the middle of a competition. You don't need to sit on the floor and kind of just meditate in front of everybody. Because sometimes one slow breath is enough to create that gap from, the emotional reaction to what the next decision actually is. Now, there's one more important point to think about is that breathing isn't, a magic trick. You can't wait until, the most pressurized moment and expect that a breathing technique you heard on a podcast is going to suddenly transform your performance. So it has to be trained just like physical skills. If you want your breathing to help you in those pressure moments, then you have to practice it when you're not under pressure. So spending a few minutes incorporating breathing into your normal training, then practice it during more challenging drills. Then practice it when you're fatigued. Then practice it when you're under simulated, pressurized moments. Eventually that breathing technique becomes familiar enough to where you can access it when you actually need it. So if you take one thing away from today is that, you can't always control the pressure, but you can control your response to it. Your breathing is one of the few physiological processes that you can consciously influence in the middle of a competition. So when the pressure increases, don't immediately try to eliminate those feelings. Take a deep breath, slow on the exhale, relax your body, bring your attention back to the present moment, and then execute whatever your next maneuver is. Because composure isn't about never getting nervous. It's about the ability to perform while nervous. And sometimes getting there starts with something as simple as one breath. And that's what I have for you all today. Okay, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to download, share, rate, like, review the podcast. Let me know what you think. We'll talk to you all. I forgot what I was going to say. I'll talk to you all soon. Have a great rest of your day. Don't forget, today's a great day to make an impact on someone's life. All right, y'all. Have a good one.